bring 'em out, bring 'em out, bring 'em out, bring 'em out.
Ladies and gentlemen, get ready for Bring 'em Out with your hosts, Joel Richardson and Alan Hill.
Hey everybody, we're here at the Sunnybrook Ballroom inside the Speakeasy for another episode of Bring 'em Out. I'm Alan Hill, here with Soul Joel himself, Joel Richardson. We have a very special guest tonight, Chris Coccia. Thanks for joining us, Chris.
So I want to introduce Chris in a special way. Him and I have known each other for years. A lot of different stories we're going to get into. But to kind of just sum it up with one post that he posted, okay, because Chris wears many hats. Mm-hmm. But obviously, you know, he's evolved so many times. That's what we're going to get into, the history of the Philadelphia comedy scene. And he's been around for doing comedy for 4 decades now, right? 80s, 90s.
Yeah, end of the 80s, 90s, yeah.
So 5 decades, technically, if this is the 5th. But you posted something that made me laugh so hard. You were with your loving wife at the DC Improv. And you could see him and his wife were like on the dance floor having a moment, and he was like, just want to give a shout out. I'm with my wife and happy anniversary. And it was a Monday night. I'm like, my God, Chris, you couldn't take a Monday off to celebrate the anniversary with your wife? And without taking context, I realized it was the DC Improv's anniversary. Yeah. And that's why Chris was there. But I'm like, another beautiful moment on social media brought to you by Chris Coccia.
It is not. It would not be unlikely that it was also our anniversary. I don't like to leave the house. So it was a big day for her to get.
It would have been a big 2 for 1.
Wouldn't that? Oh, can you imagine a 2 for like that? Yes. 30th. What if our anniversaries had coincided? But theirs was 30th. So yeah. But well, man, it's great to be here. Thank you guys. Thank you. Yeah, it's awesome.
That's one of the ways that you've evolved too, is that you teach comedy classes down at the DC Improv. So you're not only running Philadelphia, you're running DC.
Yeah, I'm in DC pretty much every Sunday. Our classes go 4 weeks, then we do a grad show. We do 1 week now virtual, like we do one-on-ones, which is nice because I don't have to travel, and it gives me a little more like FaceTime with each individual student. But yeah, man, hey, I'm an Amtrak Select Plus member. So, yeah, that's right. All the M&Ms I want.
We didn't mean to brag so early in the episode.
Well, just dropping it, you know.
So you don't drive down. You take the.
No, oh my God. So I fell into this I've known Allison since she was a waitress at the Improv. Because it's like here. It's like the kind of club where like you don't just get to know the owner, if you get to know everybody, right? So it's the same with your club. People come up, audience. You have regular audience there. You have like people that have been working there for years. Like the first time I worked there, it was so weird because I walked in and they're like, "Hey, are you Chris Coccia?" And I'm like, "Yes." Like I'm thinking I'm in trouble for something. And they're like, "How do you like the hotel?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's great." Like, okay, well, let me show you the green room. And I'm like, I've been coming from like places where you're staying in dumpy condos where the owner hates you right out. Like I work for places where you were in their way, right? And we went to the DC Improv, and it was like so welcoming. And I'm like, I'm just your feature, right? Like I thought maybe they
already felt
confused
at
me.
home.
Yeah, and because you get that here too, right? Like there's always somebody that comes up and says hi to you. There's always somebody to make sure things are cool, and it's the difference between, for a comic, it's a difference between a club you can't wait to go back to and a club that you're like, I'll take their money, but I'm gonna like. Yeah. I'm telling you, there was a club in Norfolk, Virginia.
I thought you were coughing instead of saying the name.
There's a club. Oh no, it's gone. It's long gone. But the owner was such he used to carry a pistol tucked into the back of his pants, right? Like so that people could see it. That was like his whole.
That's how he paid you?
Oh yeah, right. Yeah. Can you outrun this?
By the way, it's a little short.
Yeah. I don't know if I showed you the back of my pants, but I'm a little light here. He would make all the comics, if you wanted to eat, all had to be sitting at the bar at the certain time. It was just a miserable SOB.
It's crazy.
And I remember driving and calling my friend Mike and going like, man, do you ever like just want to make a U-turn and say screw it and like just not go? And he's like, yeah. He goes, of course, but you got to remember, you got a kid, you got a house. I'm like, right. That, but those are those gigs, right? It's the difference between those gigs that are just so great and where you like look forward to it, and those when you're just like, oh no.
You have to remind yourself about family on the drive.
Yeah, right. You got to carry a spreadsheet with you. Like, oh no, wait, I need this money because this is coming up. Right? Yeah. And like not to keep blowing smoke up Joel's ass, but I
enjoy it.
But like Joel's a guy, like I know if if I have a date with you on the calendar, no matter what it was, with one exception, it's like this show will work. This show's going to be good.
Oh boy,
do you know what I mean? Like
we talked about that off camera.
Yeah, we did. We don't have to talk about it, but we did.
I'd rather not.
We did a gig. I pulled up. It was in somebody's garage in the driveway.
That's the exception?
No. That wasn't that. But I went.
No. The one we talked about was the exception.
It had every possibility to be the worst show on earth, and it was amazing.
Yeah.
Right. Like everybody was great. The audience was great, and it was because you put it together right. So anyway, I'm done.
No. It was it was half tent. Which I was like, I feel at home. They almost recreated the dome,
right.
Which I thought that might do, but it was a 16 sweet 16.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
But for a dude, so you're like, all right, this is kind of whatever. It's like
he was into comedy, right?
He was into comedy, right? And they're like, this is gonna be great. And I walk in and they're like, oh, look who's here. Like the whole place knew me. I didn't know them. They knew me from coming to shows. And then I'm like, and I started recognizing people.
Okay.
But it was half in the garage, half in this tent on the driveway. And Chris is like, this ain't. Yeah.
And everybody on that show crushed it.
Yeah.
And it was great. It was like, but it was great. But it's because you went in with a reputation, right? I think that was a big part of it, because that definitely could have been a nightmare.
But the other two guys too were having breakfast, and they're like, oh, we were already talking about it this morning. Dennis and KC, they were like. The same thing he just said basically, and it was like Joel's never put us in a bad situation.
Right.
They're like, oh really? Have you ever done a gig on Sunday afternoon? This could be the exception. Let's see what happens.
Yes.
Test
this premise.
Yeah, right. Like let's see how far. But no, man, it's it's as a comic, that's all you want is to like trust that the person putting the show together. Like knows what they're doing and isn't going to put you in a bad situation because the comic always gets blamed.
Right.
It's never oh well there were no lights, the PA didn't work and everybody was drunk. It's he wasn't real funny.
Totally.
It's always that.
Totally.
It always comes down to the comic. So
yeah, man. No, I've been a musician my whole life. I've played in bands. I've dealt with countless promoters, and Joel's I like to say he's the first honest promoter I've ever met.
Oh, nice.
I mean,
I always tell people, I was like, I'm not in this for a money grab, and I'm in this for the long haul.
Mm-hmm.
And just last Sunday, Pat Dixon goes, yeah, you've been producing shows for almost 20 years. I think every comic knows that you're in this for the long haul. I go, that's not what I meant, but that's a really good point.
Right. It's the long grift.
But it probably, in some ways, it probably feels like you just started, right?
Oh God, yeah, absolutely. Like every show, and I talk about this in the class. I'm like, I'm a little nervous before every show, which is where you want to be, right? Like if you're not, it's like you think like the beginning of like a race or an event, right? You're not nervous, but you're like excited. Like I can't wait to get out and get this started. Because there's that kind of energy, which is great, right? Like when that's gone, I don't want to do this anymore.
Do you still get nervous if family or people you know are in the audience?
Oh my God, yeah.
It's gotta be weird.
It's the worst. Oh, it's the worst. I had an event. We were just talking about this club. There was a club on South Street, and funny about it. And my friend came out, and she sat right next to the stage. and
Why wouldn't she?
Yeah, of course, right next to the stage. But like it was like a I don't know what you call that. Like where the stage kind of sticks out, right? And then but
Stairs?
they're seating on either side.
Oh,
seating
yeah.
on either side, right? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, kill
Like-
box.
The old kill box.
Yeah. So anyway, she's over here, and there's nobody around her, so everybody can see her and me, and she's had a few drinks, so I'm doing my set, and she's agreeing with me, like like the that's true, that is true about him. He does do that, right?
Oh, man.
And you're like, oh,
So they
no,
think
no.
she's your Ed McMahon.
Oh, it was like having Ed McMahon,
Except-
but more drunk.
That's saying something.
If you can imagine.
If I can imagine, right. It was so. She's like, his wife doesn't do that. Oh,
Not only was this unprepared, it's completely unnecessary.
oh man, it was, what do you can't say? You do? Hey, could you just shut up for a little bit?
Fact checking your bits.
Was that the first time she saw you?
No, she'd seen me before, but just sat kind of right there, and it was just the setup of it was like the spotlight was bleeding over onto her, so.
That kind of stuff sets up some really funny moments because we had Eleanor Kerrigan here,
Yeah.
and she caught her brother on his cell phone in the front row during her act.
Wait, he was taping her?
No. He was texting her
Oh,
something.
he was ignoring her.
Yeah.
And
Totally.
I think
It
she
led to
said.
5 minutes. It
I
was
think
great.
she said she goes, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm trying some new stuff, and I totally lost my own brother in this.
That's what it was.
That's, oh my god.
God forbid I try out some new jokes."
It's you want them like my cousin and his wife came out with some friends a month ago, and I'm like, just sit in the back, like I don't want to see you, it's not even that it makes you nervous, it's just weird,
It's gotta
right?
be.
Because you kind of slip into a character when you go on stage, even if that character is really close to who you are, it's still a variation on who you are.
Yeah.
And so with somebody who knows you, sees you, you kind of feel like you're fooling them or something, right? Like
You're
you're
breaking
like,
that wall or
yeah, right.
whatever.
You're like, you feel like you're putting on a show, and they're like, why is he acting like that? And it's like, well, because that's on stage, Chris. That's it's slightly different than who you know.
You kind of struck me as someone who's an extrovert on stage.
On stage, yeah, exactly.
Off stage, you're like, oh my gosh, he doesn't even talk.
Yeah, no, that's definitely me. Yeah. Although now I don't know. I tend to be a little more extroverted when I go out, but not so much. Like I don't like. Yeah, I get mad when people sit next to me, like on the train, like like you just want your space. But
You must bike so far, because you actually sent me a picture. You biked so far. You live just outside of King of Prussia, and you biked on the other side of the river trail, I guess, and you made it to where Warriorsford was, where our dome was.
Right.
And he goes, "Hey, this is your dome in the background. Look." And I'm like, "Dude, you maniac." I go, "You live like
well, I
15, 20 miles at least, probably."
yeah, no, that was. But I love riding. I mean, it's great.
That's how you keep in such good shape,
It's
buddy.
how I stay in shape, but it's also how I stay mentally sane. Like I need that, right? Like I need, like for me, and I think for a lot of people, like any kind of exercise, right? Like people go to the gym and they just because you need it.
That's your escape.
It's escape. It's yeah, man. During the pandemic, oh my god, like I had so much going on with my parents were sick and and just get on that bike for like 2 hours and go out and you're like, yep, nobody can get a hold of me here.
Exercising your mental health for real.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for real, absolutely.
It's
Yeah,
huge.
yeah. It was just I'll tell you a funny story. I had
That's why we're here.
I was on this. No, I'm telling you one that's. I got one that's dull and slow moving. I think you really.
When Chris goes into something and doesn't say, "I got a funny story," you're like, "This should be a bore."
This is going nowhere. It circles back on itself, and there's no point.
Alan, get ready to take over.
You're gonna love the dead end that this story goes into. Do you like disappointing stories? We all do. Here we go. I got needless details. I got all the hallmarks of a crapola story.
So anyway,
So Middle of the pandemic, I'm out riding, and this guy, I thought he cut me off in his car. Long story short, we're
You're on the
yelling.
bike.
I'm on the bike. He's in a truck. We're yelling at each other. Da 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 da. And then we both realize. And by the way, his girlfriend or wife was in the passenger seat, who must have at this point been like, "What is going on?" Right? Because we're yelling at each other. You didn't. Blah, 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 blah. And then he said, "Well, I thought you nodded for me to go," and I was like, "Well, I thought you were waving me through." And then we're like realizing like it was just a misunderstanding. And so now we're like, hey man, I'm really sorry, right? We're back and forth like apologizing. Like, man, I'm
Hugging it
sorry,
out.
man. So and I'm like, he's like, it's just everything going on. And I'm like, yeah, man, I'm going through a lot. I apologize, man. I just, it's just it scared me and I'm like really sorry. And he's like, yeah, man, have a good ride. And he takes off. And I just start rolling and I'm just crying. I just started crying because it was like during when my parents were sick, but I was like, I can only imagine if somebody driving the other way, seeing, I don't know, I saw him out on his bike, weeping. He was weeping. Like, what the hell happened there? But that's what I'm talking about. Like that, it was just like my emotional release, and that happened in the middle of it, and I was like, okay, well, this is, like, who do you tell that to? Like, I come home and tell my wife, what'd you do today? I was out on the bike crying, like people do.
The image of somebody that just saw you the weekend before driving
Oh,
past
yeah, that's
you.
what I always hope for, right? That's what I always, like, it's like, in my back of my mind, it's like, that's a comedian. Why is he on his bike crying? You can see he's crying.
Are you sweating? No, those are tears.
Yeah, right. It's just sweat coming out of my eyeballs.
That's awesome.
But it was just like such like that emotionally kind of just explosive, and that I always want to find that guy. Like I'm always hoping to come out to a show or something.
Oh my god!
Because it was just such a weird moment.
Like, why do you look so familiar?
Yeah, right. Well, you remember me from crying on the side of the road on the bike? Yeah.
Did you drive? You were driving off too?
Yeah, right. You remember? Are you still with that woman? Because I didn't think anybody would stay with anybody after that whole back and forth, where we're gonna kill each other and then we're apologizing. Anyway.
So, I always pride myself on trying to be as creative as possible with shows. You were on a very creative show, and you and I have talked offline about this. As a comedy producer, I love that there's other shows. It's like eating at a restaurant. You have to go to other places. You can't only get comedy shows at Soul Joel's. Like,
right.
As long as it's a good show, it's a great lineup, it's great for comedy, it's good for the whole scene, and I'm sure you can speak to this more. But one show that I was like, man, this was great, and I wish I had this idea. You know what I'm going to say?
Which one? I don't know.
It was the Comedy Works reunion at Philly Punchline.
Oh yeah.
Please tell me that show didn't get canceled.
No. It happened. It happened.
It doesn't look like I'm watching Chris's face, and he's like, not ringing a bell, not sure what you're talking about.
That is no. That did happen. Unfortunately, I was sick. So I did the show, but I took right off, and I missed out on hanging out with.
You could tell that this wasn't prepared. I was just throwing questions at you.
No, but it was
whatever you do, don't bring up that show.
So yeah, right. No. There's still a lot of depositions out there. Yeah. The show was good. It was fun. It was people that I hadn't seen in a long time. And that's where I started. I started at the Comedy Works in Philly, going to open stage nights.
Now it is now in Bristol, but when you started, it was on 2nd Street, right?
Yeah. So the one in Bristol now is I think that Steve actually sold the name of that place.
Okay.
So I don't even think that that's associated with Steve Young, who was the one who opened the Comedy Works. They were at one point the same, it was the same owners, but I think that Joy, his sister, who ran the Bristol room, passed away, God, probably 10 years now.
I didn't realize that was his sister.
Yeah,
Okay,
Joy was his sister. She ran that place. Steve ran the downtown, and then he went out to L.A. The one on over the Middle East restaurant, which was, oh my God, it was crazy. I went down there because Todd Glass, who I knew,
One of my favorites.
Yeah, so from high school, I knew him from high school.
No kidding.
Yeah, he was a Conestoga grad.
Do you know the Doylestown Cabaret?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Do you know the owner there?
Andy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ask him about the last time Todd Glass was there. Do you know about this by any chance?
No, but I know Todd. Yeah.
The lights came on towards the end of his set. Andy turned them on. Said, Todd, I told you it had to end after an hour. They went back and forth for 10 minutes. People in the crowd thought it was a bit. It was the most amazing thing I've ever seen in a comedy show. I emailed him after the show and said, I don't know what that was tonight.
Hey, you emailed
The owner.
Todd.
No,
You emailed Andy.
Yeah.
And I just emailed the club, not knowing who I would get. You know what I mean? I said, I don't know what happened tonight. I don't know if that was a bit or if it was for real. But I just wanted to tell you it was the greatest comics experience of my life. I had to dive out of my car at the first red light because my buddy and I were recapping the show and we started laughing again. And I got a knot in my stomach. I had to dive out of my car and roll around in the grass. It was unbelievable. The show was like 2 hours and 25 minutes long. It was unbelievable.
Yeah. Todd will. I mean, he just takes over. You know, and I know like some places it works. But right, like there's a situation where if you got a second show coming in.
Right. And I don't know who knows. I didn't know what they discussed or whatever.
I don't know.
Whatever it was, but it made priceless as a crowd member.
Oh,
it was
yeah.
unbelievably priceless.
Right, that's hilarious. But what was
I'll tell you. Sorry, I had a Todd story years because he can be antagonistic, as you saw. We did back, so like 90s comedy was everywhere, right? Like when did you jump in? When did you?
2006.
2006.
But
so,
I've been a fan.
So were you like? I mean, did you see that initial wave where comedy was literally everywhere?
Yeah. Well,
right.
I went. Yeah. I mean, I started when Dane Cook and Chappelle were going back and forth on who could do longer sets. And they were doing like 3, 4, 5 hour sets, like in that the 2000s.
Right. Okay. So there was a point before that where comedy just like it was everywhere, right? Like it just took off. They had like the Dangerfield Young Comedies, comic specials, and HBO, and comedy was just like literally, if you had an empty room in a restaurant, in a hotel, it was a comedy night.
Wow.
So there was one up on the Boulevard, up on Route 1, up in Northeast Philly, right across from the Nabisco factory.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's the only way people know things, right? Is what's it across from?
Food references. I really appreciate it. Now we're cooking.
Now we got you. Now
You're talking
we
my
got
language.
You. This is my favorite joke from that time because it was in
Chris,
the
you have ADD?
a little. It was the Nabisco factory, and they got bought out by Keebler.
Yeah.
And I said I knew there was some trouble. I saw 3 elves with briefcases walking in. It was a hostile takeover. Anyway. So there's this room, one nighter, and like Northeast, right? So it's like it's like a Northeast crowd, and Todd's screwing around, and he antagonizes somebody to the point where the guy's like, I'm gonna after the show. Yeah, I had to go bring Todd's car around to a side door. He ran out, got in, and we flew out of there. Because that's what he'll do.
Wow.
Like,
I believe it. Yeah.
Right? Like it can end up really funny, or you're flying down the boulevard looking in the rearview mirror.
It's priceless, man.
It was enough of the he tipped the car over with Wid's like a Philly legendary Wid prop act from Philly, been around for years. They're driving and he's screwing around and he goes, "Oh look, it's like a cop show," and he like tries to boom, tips over. He had like a Ford Bronco or something like that. Tips it over right in the
Wow.
So I got a Wid story. Wid hosted one of the first open mics that I was 6 months in. I did it was at the Laugh House.
Okay.
I was in between Christmas and New Year's. I was still doing pharmaceutical sales. I was only 6 months in. I was at home visiting my family. A couple of kids from my high school were coming. I'd already been going for the last 6 years to the Comedy Cellar once a month, so I'd seen a lot of the guys. So right after I go, they're like, "Please welcome Keith Robinson." And Keith Robinson comes in because he was at home visiting family because he's from Philly. Dude, he annihilates, right? And I'm like, thank God he went after me, because I would have really, I would have ate my face even more if I would have had to follow that.
Yeah.
Dude, so I went out and I had a couple of vodkas in me. And he was talking to the owner with Rod, right? And I go, unsolicited advice, right up to Keith Robinson and go, Keith, hang in there, man. You're right there. You're right there. And it was because the first time I walked into the cellar, I saw him hosting with Dave Attell, Louis C.K., and in walks Chris Rock. And it was like all those guys, Geraldo and Lisa Lampanelli. And I saw all those guys from then get like huge. And I thought to myself, Keith, you're up.
Yeah, man. Yeah, you're on deck, man. Right, you're next.
Meanwhile, he's a headlining comic tour across
yeah,
the country. He's been on
So
TV a
funny.
million times.
Keith looked at me, looked at Rod, and goes, "Do you hear this?" He goes, "This guy says just hang in there. I'm almost there." The guy was already a working comic, been on more times you could count on TV. But this guy from South Jersey goes, "Just hang in there."
Keep going, buddy. You got it.
And you say it to a guy who makes cellar people
Right.
quick in their boots.
Right, right.
Right. Oh, that's so funny.
Wow. That's great.
But how many different places have you seen like that you performed at, and like the scene change? Because you were mentioning to me one time off that you actually saw Dice perform his special at the Comedy Works, right?
So Dice worked. So there were 2 rooms.
Okay.
Well, there were 3 rooms in Philly. So they all came out of this place. I mean, this is where I wish, like, we were talking about Steve, the owner. It was Aunt. It was Minnie's. Something. I want to say like Aunt Minnie's or something like that. It was in University City. They were doing comedy up there. It started getting bigger and bigger. 3 of the people from there opened up their own clubs. There was Comedy Factory Outlet, which was off of Bank Street, a block and a half from the Comedy Works, which was over the Middle East Restaurant on between 2nd and Front on Chestnut. Oh, Dice in Philly, yeah. Tons. Not to just dwell on Dice, but tons of acts came through there. But yeah, it was like you had to kind of choose, right? So Gilbert was a Comedy Works guy.
Oh, I love Gilbert.
I want to say that a lot of them were good. Saget was a Comedy Works guy.
Was he that dirty back then?
I didn't realize. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
A little,
No.
a little dirty. Yeah. Yeah, he was that kind of not as dirty as he was towards the end. You know,
I saw him about 5 years before he died.
Yeah. It was, but I think then it was more shocking because of who you like. But that's a TV dad.
Right.
Because
you know?
people knew him from that, or
Right.
And America's Funniest Home Videos. Yeah.
Right. Oh, he's a nice guy.
Mr. Clean.
Did he start comedy in Philly?
That is a good question.
But I know he's originally from
Right,
Philly.
right.
Yeah, and I don't know. He may have started at UPenn.
Okay.
Because a bunch of acts. I'm trying to think. I think Paul Provenza.
Oh, wow.
Might have been. Man, but I don't want to just make.
Well,
stuff
so
up,
who would you say is in your class then?
So
guys that are in your class and
who was in my class
Just behind
that
you,
I
just
started
after
out? Paul Tompkins.
Oh, yeah.
Was he was a Comedy Works guy. He was actually in a comedy duo. There were 2 of them, and I'm trying to remember the name. Man, this is where you wish you'd written stuff down. His partner, I believe, died.
Oh, jeez.
And I want to I want to say it wasn't in a not that it's any way is a happy way of dying, but it was like tragic if I remember.
Yeah.
But anyway, but Paul was a Philly guy. Todd Glass. I'm trying to think who else.
so those were guys that you were hitting mics with early on.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Todd was a little ahead of me, actually probably a lot ahead of me, just because he moved up pretty quickly. Why am I'm like blanking on who else? Because there's so many like New York people that came down. Tom Wilson was a Philly guy, although he went out to L.A. pretty quickly. But I remember I drove to a show with him and Todd Glass.
Oh,
I'm like the nobody in the car, but I have a car, so I'm going to the show.
You are now somebody.
I'm driving. I'm like, well, we're going to be late. And Tom Wilson goes, "What are they going to do? The whole show is here. What are they going to do? Start without us?
Right,
We're all
right,
in the car,
right.
But yeah, I'm trying to think who else. oh my gosh, writer of like everything now, or was Adam McKay was a Comedy Works guy.
Jesse.
Shout out to our producer Jesse
Yeah,
Marchese.
yeah. Nice catch, man. Because I would have never remembered. But Adam started after me, and I don't remember. I probably like crossed paths with him, like maybe on a showcase show or something. But yeah, he was pretty quickly like, I'm out of here. If I remember correctly. Keith Robinson.
Oh,
definitely.
yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Like a Philly guy.
I
and,
brought this up to Mike Vecchione. I said, if there's like a
Mike Vecchio.
Oh, yeah.
they should really create like a without realizing all of the names that you mentioned and everything affiliated with you, like the Keith Robinson tree of everyone, because then he helped like
Kevin Hart famously.
Kevin Hart and and then like Touré and but then also like Kurt Metzger, Joe DeRosa, Big J Okerson, all those guys. And Mike goes, if anybody cares except for you, that'd be great. He goes, I mean, in theory, it sounds like a great documentary.
Yeah, right.
But does everybody have more enthusiasm than you do, Joel? She goes, I don't know if it'll get picked up.
But you know what's weird? It to defend Philly a little bit, right? Is it like Boston? They did that, right? They did a documentary
the Ding
about
Ho.
the Boston scene.
Yep.
Yeah. And I will say, as somebody, like I said to you guys earlier off air, but that was like my sister city. Like I would go up and work Boston a ton.
Wait, you're working
I
both
loved it.
sides of the coast here, buddy.
What do you mean?
You went up to Boston, now you're down at D.C. You're
Yeah.
so unpredictable.
Oh yeah,
You don't know where I'm at.
Hey man, I work the Northeast corridor like nobody.
This is gangsta.
Yeah, right. If 95 touches it, I'm working it. I mean, I'm not Florida. Hey.
Easy now.
You're one badass bicycler.
If there's a bike path there, I am there. But they did right. They did that whole movie about the Boston scene. And granted, like there were great guys that came out of it, but there's amazing people that worked out of Philly too. But Philly was always the town. Like, and I remember somebody saying that early on. Like, this is the town where you can screw up because you'll be under the radar. Mm-hmm. And then, and people would ask, oh, if you're so good, why don't you go up to New York? Right? And that was kind of the because it was close enough to New York that it didn't get to be its own scene. Right? Like, as soon as guys were ready, felt like they were ready to make it, they went up to New York. Like we're talking about, like Wayne Cotter, who was on The Tonight Show a ton, was a Philly guy, but went up to New York and then out to L.A. Hosted Comic Strip Live, and but Todd Glass, same deal, went right out to L.A. Everybody was to get out of Philadelphia.
As soon as you're ready to spread your wings, you fly away.
That's it, right? That's it. And whereas with Boston, it was far enough away from New York that it got to be kind of its own independent scene. Same with like Chicago, right, or San Francisco. Isn't stuck being tied to L.A. because they're too far away.
Poor Philadelphia can't even be second city.
No, right? That's it, right? You can't even be second city, right? Right? We're
the JV to the JV.
We're the batting cage, man. We're the batting cage, right? Right. You go there, you swing the bat a couple of times, and then when you got it down, you head out, right? But yeah, I think a lot of people forget. I mean, Dom Herrera is a Philly guy, right? But he started not in Philadelphia. He's, I
wondered about that.
But no, I think I would have.
Where did you do comedies in the 40s?
Ouch.
So I think he's an
Dom.
LA guy now, but I think
he was New York. Yeah.
Oh, he went to New York first?
Like
For sure.
90s and early 2000s, he was a New York guy. Yeah.
Oh, even before that.
Dude, he was on the Golden Girls.
Yeah. He was. Yeah. Was he on the Golden Girls?
He was on the Golden Girls.
You know what? You know what's so funny? I tell this to people all the time now. How this has changed, right? Like what the business model is for a comic, right? But in the beginning, it was clubs, work your way up from host to feature to headliner. Then you go to New York or to L.A. You work your way up there. You get seen by an agent. Maybe you get onto a late night show. The network sees you, and then they develop something for you, or they try to fit you into stuff. But there's Jay Leno is on an episode of Laverne and Shirley. And you have, like, it's just like, you go, well, that's why he's not an actor. Okay, got it, right? Like, it's just bad. But I remember somebody saying that to, talking about Brian Regan. Was like, they didn't, because they couldn't figure out how to fit him into a show, right? Now, he's done all right for himself. Yeah.
It's worked out okay. Yeah.
He's no Philadelphia.
Yeah, right. If selling out theaters is doing okay, he's doing okay. But that was it. Like that mentality, and thank goodness now it's changed. Where there's a million different outlets. Comics can kind of figure it's more work for the comedians, but you can kind of define your own path.
That's really cool.
But right. So like somebody like that. Joe Bolster was another Philly guy. But yeah, there was some great guys.
Before we move on to that, so I was still trying to find myself and do open mics, and I was wearing the Soul shirt, but hadn't started yet. Soul Joel Productions. I come out of the back at Joe Franklin's in Times Square, and Joe Franklin was there. I ended up running into two girls that I went to college with. I was getting my master's; they were in undergrad. And they were with a third friend I'd never met before. They were like, "Hey, by the way, so-and-so, this is Joel. He does comedy." They're like, "What are you doing here?" I was like, "Actually, I was doing comedy in this back room here." They're like, "Oh, what a small world." And this girl immediately goes, "My cousin does comedy." And I go, "Oh, no kidding." She goes, "I don't even know if he does it anymore. We haven't spoken in a few years." I go, "Really? What's your cousin's name?" She goes, "Brian Regan." I go, "Well, yes." As a matter of fact, he is. In case you're not pen pals, because email was already a thing then, I go, "He's doing well. I don't know how close your family is." I haven't seen him on the open mic circuit.
Yeah.
But Brian's still doing it.
That's great. Oh, that's
And even then, 2006, 2007, he was probably still one of the top touring acts in the country.
Oh my God,
huge
absolutely.
for a long
killing
time.
Yeah.
But I couldn't even, I actually looked up. I'm like, is she punking me right now?
That's
Right.
amazing that you
Like,
would
are
know.
you trying to? Yeah, is that an open mic joke? Are you trying to
But you know what? Comics
Belittle me?
fly under the radar unless they're like unbelievably popular.
Right.
Right. Like, you mentioned it to somebody who's not a comedy fan, and like, I don't know. Right. It has to be like, I don't even know like who's a household name. Like, I mean,
you gotta go to Chappelle, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Chappelle.
Rogan,
and
maybe.
probably because of controversy more than comedy.
Absolutely.
Right, like it's
Absolutely.
That's and again, it may be because there's so many like niche acts, right? You don't have a Leno now. You don't have a Seinfeld where like that is everybody knows that person.
I think it's
Yeah.
comics become household names when they do something outside of comedy.
Yeah, yeah.
Kevin
Yeah.
Hart, they don't
Become
don't
a movie
just
star,
know him.
become a this or that or the other. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep,
Right.
Yep, absolutely.
They know him from other things.
Absolutely, because we
Even
were talking.
Whoopi Goldberg.
Right.
People probably don't
Right.
even realize
Oh,
that
that
Whoopi.
she was-
yeah.
That Whoopi's a stand-up.
Yeah, she
Or
was in
maybe
that
even Ellen.
one person show craze in the '80s with
Yeah.
when that was going on in New York City a lot. Yeah, and the those benefit things on HBO with
Yeah.
Robin Williams and.
People sometimes were like, I think Will Smith's a pretty funny comedian. I go, first of all,
I ask people who they know who their favorite comics are. I get that. I get Will Ferrell.
Yeah.
like very funny people, but not stand-ups.
comedic actors.
Right.
They're not
It's a very
comics.
different thing. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, the that Judd Apatow book. Have you ever read?
I
Judd-
feel like you're on something that we talked about 10 minutes ago. You can't
Oh
get
no
out of your head.
no. I was when
If
you're
I
talking.
could just remember that story that I hit pause.
when you were talking about
Joe
like,
and Alan doing a good job just delaying this story.
the Judd Apatow
Todd class,
book,
anyway.
I'm never gonna get the story finished. I'm gonna be back on my bike crying. Why wouldn't they let me finish a story about Judd Apatow's book? He has a book called Sick in the Head. Have you read it? It's a great book, but he interviews comics, but he did stand up.
Okay.
And so the perspective is really interesting.
Because he's one of us.
Because
He
he's one of us.
started,
Right.
yeah.
Right. He do, and it's so. Have you ever read the book?
No.
No.
Oh my God!
Now-
you have,
now
you,
I'm
now I
you
wanna
got
read
to.
it, yeah.
You got to. And it'll probably be out of print, right? But you'll find it.
I prefer the
I don't know
audio.
if you kids know this store, Amazon. They have
Yeah.
books, but yeah, it's great. There's so many great stories in there. And then there's another book called. We're not book chatting here.
I'm not crying.
like
You're
books.
crying.
But just
I actually cried while reading a book the other night.
Perfect timing.
See, now you brought it all around.
That makes for
That's
a
how
really
it
good
works.
podcast.
What are you asking me about Philadelphia?
It's a whole scene, man. It's a whole scene.
It was amazing. It really was a fun scene. And I don't know what comedy's like now for people starting out. Like, I wonder if I hope it's still like that kind of crazy, like, what the hell are we doing feeling? You know what I mean? Like, I hope people are like enjoying it, but a little nervous and a little not sure of like, but you feel like you're in that like little secret society. You know?
It's so cool.
Dude, I remember going to like the South Street Diner and just talking and joking, and you come out and the sun's coming up over New Jersey, right over Camden. The sun's rising over Camden across the Delaware River, and it's just like, what? Oh my, how do we do this? And then the next week you do it all over again. So hopefully that's not lost.
At that one
So
peak,
cool.
though, there was comedy going on 7 nights a week, right?
I mean,
Were you
you could
performing?
always find. Yeah, you could always. Yeah. You could work pretty much Tuesday through Sunday. There was something.
Wow.
And you really couldn't. I mean, you couldn't really have a day job because you're performing so much, right?
Yeah, I mean, people would because the money was terrible.
Okay,
right?
okay,
So that
okay.
was the problem. Unless you were a headliner.
Right.
If you were a headliner, you could probably do okay. The problem was like we were talking about 6.5 hours ago when we started.
Circling back.
There were clubs everywhere, right? So there were just like dumps and dives, and there's a place called Betty's Fireside, which I wish I could remember where it was. It was in. Do you know Betty's?
No, but I like.
You hear stories about
yes,
it still. Yeah.
Yes.
It
Like
was-
when you ask comics about a nightmare gig, top 3 is one of them's from there.
Is
No
Betty's
kidding.
Fireside.
Oh, I love it.
They would boo you as you were being introduced.
Oh, wow.
Chris, boo, and then just depending on what you look like, it was going to be a homophobic slur, a racial slur, or maybe a combination of all, of everything. Maybe we'll roll it all into
old
one.
trifecta.
Sexist.
Philly special.
Where was that?
There was it was in like North Jersey, but west.
Okay.
So like off of 80 somewhere. But all I remember is that the money was good, right? So like you knew it was gonna be horrible. You knew driving.
But you're
up.
like, I'm gonna deal with it.
You knew parking, but it was. I think it might have paid like $200, right? Which at the time was like, yeah, that's coin.
And it was during the week?
It was during the week. Yeah, it was either a Wednesday or Thursday. It's somebody like like I said, any comic from that era, if you lived in like New York or Philly area, you'll know that. Or if you were based out of Jersey, you at some point worked it and hated it and went back again because the money was good. But there was a place here, the Friendly Tavern, which was not the Friendly Tavern. It was
Not to be confused with Friendlies.
not to be refused with. Oh, the ice cream place.
That's why I know it.
Now the Friendly Tavern.
The old home of the
Friendly
Fribble.
Tavern is down in Delaware County. I don't know what route it's off of. Probably near Route 3, somewhere in Delaware County.
Okay.
And they would hate you. There were places. There were just places.
Wait, me
with
personally or any comic?
anybody.
I feel like that was directed at
They
me.
weren't. They weren't. They had no. Yeah, right. They didn't. They didn't discriminate. Whoever, if you were performing, they would hate you. There were places where where like you just didn't even know why you were doing it, right?
Yeah.
Like why do they continue to do comedy here? But I guess it's probably cheaper than a band, you know?
Yeah, well, and we lost out to the DJs.
Oh yeah, so, yeah, right. So
Yeah, everyone's got a pecking order.
yeah, right.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. Why get it my 5-piece band or my 13-piece band I
Yeah.
had at one point when you can
Oh, no.
hire a DJ for a quarter of that,
Or
you know?
or karaoke.
And
night.
that DJ makes more than any single member of the band would have. You know?
Right.
Right. Yeah, that was there were many times on stage when I wished I was with a band, when I wish I could turn to somebody else just for moral support, you know, and go, oh, God, this sucks, right? Like, you wanted to turn to somebody, but then when you got paid $50 and didn't have to divide it 6 ways, it was better.
Fuck
you
the
know?
moral support.
Yeah. I'll tough it out for $50.
That's one of the fun. We have this conversation a lot about the differences and similar. There's a lot of similarities, but there's some striking differences. You know what I mean? And the teamwork thing is one of them. I always say, man, the first 100 shows I went to or so, took a picture of just the microphone on stage.
Yeah.
You know, because it amazed me that some dude was going to go up there with nothing but this and this and this and entertain us for an hour. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
I got my buddies. You know, like if I screw up, they're going to pick me up. You know what I mean? So it's a really interesting difference.
Yeah, it is. It is something like it's so interesting, and I think that so many comics, you are people that like I wasn't a class clown.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't that person. Probably I would be considered like an introvert, or at least not looking to get out and be like a clown.
Mm-hmm.
But there's something in our head that goes, well, I guess I could walk in front of a room full of strangers and tell what I think is funny for 5 to 10 minutes, right? Like that. It's
amazing.
It's terrifying, but it's like, well, I guess I better go do that. You know, right? Like why? Like why? And there were definitely times when I was backstage going, I could leave. Nobody would know. Nobody would know, right? Like,
Yeah.
I could just leave and this would be done, and I could just run away.
Do you feel like that you have that feeling knowing whether it's going to be good or it's going to be bad, and you might be off a little bit, but you're pretty like keyed in on.
Yeah, yeah. I think now you can kind of get a vibe for it, like with the audience. You could hear like a buzz, and you know it as a club owner, right? You can hear that room when it's heating up, right? When the audience is like, if you come in and you can hear like the clink of glasses, and that's it. Like
no energy.
There's gonna be a work crowd. You're gonna have to work for these guys. Versus like when you go in and there's like that that low hum of an audience, you're like, oh, these guys will be good. Yeah, for sure. What were we talking about? Oh,
Well,
Philly.
Yeah.
Todd Glass.
What? Yeah, Todd Glass. That book. Did I mention a book?
Well, what would you say? Like, I don't want to say like a bomb. Like, what's the worst bomb?
Oh, my
With
God.
the exception of the last gig I booked you on.
We did a concrete energy company. Yeah.
Sweet gig.
But those, right? So we're not going to mention names or anything, but
Merry Christmas.
The did a Christmas party show, afternoon, open bar, and I had a couple of that. I had a string this year of like just
Right,
weird,
and I didn't realize
miserable.
that, but you said
was
that's
just
what
like-
made it even worse.
It was just kept like the misses kept coming, and but you kind of know that, right? So when I came in here for that show and I see the situation, like I'm mentally lowering the bar, right?
Yeah.
Not no disrespect to the club or to the audience, but I'm like, this is what they got, Like I did a show a couple years ago for realtors, and it was like realtor and real estate development people. It's an 8:30 a.m. show, So I know like that's not the energy of an 8 o'clock at night on a Saturday show.
and they're a networking party.
And they're a
like-
networking,
yeah,
right.
They're not exactly going to be like, oh, I shouldn't laugh at that.
Right.
Oh,
Right. They're like exactly like, oh, I
Not
don't-
before I've had my daiquiri.
Yeah, right. They just it's a different vibe, and so you have to that. But bombs outright, just like my favorite. I've
Swing
bombed,
and a miss.
I've bombed. I had two that I just
Neck
hang
and
on
neck.
to.
Yeah.
And because that's what comics do, right? Like
Yeah.
they hang on, you cherish them. You know what I mean? You wear them around your neck like the bullet that almost killed you, right?
Yeah.
The opened up for Shaka Khan.
No.
At the 20, yes.
Ooh.
At the 23
Pick
East
up that-
I
Cabaret.
feel for you.
At the thank you. I wish I could remember the next line.
I think I love you.
I think I love you. Thank you. I opened up for Shaka Khan at 23 East Cabaret.
Okay.
And I come in and the audience is waiting in line in the rain, so they're already super happy, and I'm relatively new. I've probably been doing comedy for maybe 10 years at most. At most at that point, it might have been less, they're backstage and we just need to do 15, maybe 20 minutes, whatever it was, just to kill time. And they introduced me, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Chris Coccia. Now, they didn't mention that there was an opening act.
Oh boy.
They didn't mention anything. They didn't say comedian Chris Coccia
Or the itinerary.
or the itinerary or
Before
Shaka
your
Khan.
headliner,
No.
Shaka Khan, they said Shaka nothing.
Yeah, the audience was. I mean,
They were in shock.
The next words, the next words needed to be Shaka Khan.
Yeah.
It needed to be, please welcome Shaka Khan, and not Chris Coccia. And there was literally a pause as I think people were breathing in air so they could boo louder. You know what I mean? Like they were sucking it in, like you're gonna bench press. They're like, boo, and it just exploded, and they just hated me for the entire time. And thank goodness they weren't like a mean crowd, but they were just. You could hear what they were thinking was enough, stop. But I'm
This white boy's stupid.
yeah, right, enough. Right? They're like, well, that's it. They're there to see Shaka Khan. They it's a big night. They've been standing in the rain.
What venue was this?
23 East Cabaret, which was
Oh.
it was like a smaller theater, standing room too. That was it. It was a standing crowd.
Standing room comedy.
Yeah, not great. Although
Not great. not ideal.
you know what? You know what? An audience that's already up and ready to rush the stage.
Nobody moved.
You
Yeah,
can't
right.
identify the aggressor.
Right. You see somebody put their foot to the blocks like on a track. You're like, they're coming. And the best part is it ends, it's over, and I walk back, and Shaka Khan was like, "Oh, you're funny." And I was like, "Oh my God, thank you for lying to me. I will always love you." Right? Like it was just she was like, "Oh, you're very funny." And
I need 10 of those bombs to hear that from Chaka Khan.
yeah, that was like the only thing that saved it.
That's cool.
But I opened up for a bunch. I opened up for Dwight Yoakam there. I opened up for Gil Scott Heron, whose crowd was amazing.
Gil Scott Heron?
Yeah.
Wow.
I got to
Whitey
work,
on the Moon?
I got to work with people that I love.
Why did you just?
So I just.
He's so impressive. You're like, oh, another bad night.
No. Oh, Gil Scott Heron or Heron. I don't know.
Heron, yeah.
Heron. How he but then it's like Van Gogh, right? Like people like you say. Do you remember the Richard Lewis bit about if not Van Gogh anymore, it's Van Gogh. And I can't remember the other one. You have to this. I'm gonna get a slice of pizza. Oh, you mean a slusa-puzza? Yeah, it's a slusa-puzza. About how anyway.
So you became like the guy to go to.
I've opened up for so many. Yeah.
music
yeah.
acts.
Yeah.
That's why you
that's
need
cool.
a comic. You're like,
Yeah, it was fun because I could take a punch and.
You got to. I saw a guy get booed off the stage at the Keswick one
I
time.
could duck and move. You got booed at Keswick?
No, I saw a comedian. I was there for a jazz guitarist named John McLaughlin.
Oh, okay.
I wish
I was going to say, because I opened up for accident the Keswick, but I never got booed
It would
off.
be
But I can't-
it would come full circle for me if I found out you were the guy that got booed off.
That would have been hilarious.
But it was this guy was super dirty and and he did not adjust his act at all. And it was you know the Keswick Opera.
Yeah.
Now you know there's subscription people there.
Yeah.
So there were grandparents with their grandchildren.
course,
at this.
yeah.
There was every age from 80 to 6. You know what I mean? And this guy comes out and starts doing like Dice in the 80s stuff. You know, and one by one, people started standing up and booing, and he gave him the old "I've done better gigs than this," threw down the mic, and ran out of there.
You can and maybe
What?
this is why you like. I mean, I've learned just from doing them, and I enjoy them. I really like.
It's got to be a fun challenge, at least, right?
Yeah, and again, like you get to meet Gil Scott Heron, right?
cool.
Like and
Chaka Khan
have
told you
Chaka
you were
Khan
funny.
tell you you're funny.
Fuck yeah.
As horrible as you know the set went, she was nice, but
So cool.
opened up for oh my God, why am I going to forget? the
While
name?
you're thinking about that,
Clark
when-
from Hee Haw.
Roy Clark.
Roy Clark. Go. Sorry.
No. I was going to ask you when you're doing this, is it like the comics where you go up and you meet them beforehand? Do you have your own dressing room, or do you ask them anything you want me to say about you, or is it no contact? And
No,
rarely like the Shaka Khan moment. You might not even see him.
I might not have ever seen her, but Roy Clark, who I grew up watching Hee Haw,
heck yeah, man.
Salute. I grew up. I loved Hee
Watch it
Haw.
with my grandma every Sunday or
so-
Saturday, whatever day it was.
I did my set and it went well. He has a nice crowd, and I'm backstage just kind of hanging out in front of. They have like a craft services little like a food area, and he's there, but I'm like I'm not gonna bother Roy Clark, and he comes up and he goes, "Oh, you're very funny." I'm like, "You're Roy Clark."
You're very funny. You're Roy Clark.
I know you.
Oh, if I could only have that moment back.
It was right. Thank you, son. I recognize that I'm Roy Clark, but
Yeah, so I've been told.
but I watched Hee Haw and had found out about there's a guitar player called Clarence Gatemouth Brown.
Yeah, Gatemouth, yeah.
Right.
I
So
saw him opening for Eric Clapton at the Spectrum back in the day.
so Clarence Gatemouth Brown was on Hee Haw one time.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and I said to Roy, I was like, to Roy, I'm calling him Roy now. Roy. I said hi to him once. Now he's Roy, Mr. Clark. So I said, I told him that. I was like, yeah, and I loved that, and it really got me into like blues and da-da-da-da-da. And he's like, oh, we did an improvisational jazz record or experimental jazz record.
What?
Which I can't find. But I was like, that's fascinating,
That's
right?
gonna be
Like,
my personal project when I get home.
yeah,
tonight.
exactly, right? Like that is like the deep dive now. It's like-
Seriously.
so yeah.
Gil Scott Heron's probably doing free verse over top of it.
Yeah. Oh my God. Right. While Shaka Khan's just sampled in the background. You're funny. You're funny. You're funny. My other bombing story, and I might have told you this was I sometimes I tell it on stage. I did the only cruise ship I've ever done. And they're horrible. I don't know how people do them. I know people who do them. I know people make money doing them.
I know people who never leave them.
Who never leave them. Yeah, I had a friend who
musician
did
buddies that do those gigs.
48 weeks was on at sea.
Wow.
For everybody keeping score at home, there's 52 weeks in a year.
52. That's
a lot.
This was a lot. So that would be more. But I did the show, and the crowd is ancient. It was a Norwegian Cruise Line, which skews, it's an older audience, and I didn't know anything about it. It was like I was a fill-in last minute, and it just goes terribly. The show is just terrible. And then the great thing is you get to stay on the ship with the audience, which you bombed in front of. It was just terrible. And so I just pretty much stayed in my room, except to like maybe eat. And I was one day I went up on the deck, and I heard this couple talking, and there was like two couples, older couples. Did you see that comedian? Ugh, he ruined everything.
Oh,
And I was just like,
Just punch you in the dick.
I was just like, whoop, back to the room I go.
Oh, man.
I mean, like he wasn't funny, that show wasn't good. He ruined everything. Like this guy's whole trip is down the toilet now because I did 45 minutes he couldn't relate to. Like.
You didn't just ruin his evening or just that moment in time.
If he had said, well, that guy was a hack, it wouldn't have been so hurtful. But I ruined everything. This guy's going to go home, start lighting photo albums on fire. These aren't worth it. Thanks to the comedian.
He's saging.
Right.
He lost his breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
I'm surprised he didn't jump over the side of the boat. He ruined everything.
Yeah.
It was just like it was the icing on the crap cake.
You got to name a special that.
I'm telling you, right?
What night? What night was that?
There were two. There were 2 nights. That's the worst part. So you're on there for 5 days, or I was, because I flew down and met him in Puerto Rico. So I didn't go from like Sunday to Sunday. I went from like Wednesday to Sunday and did 2 shows. So it was probably after the second. It was just so horrible. It was just
So that was your last performance. So that was it. You didn't have another one.
Oh, I didn't. I mean, there was no way I was redeeming myself anyway. After
he ruined everything.
He ruined everything. Did you not hear the story? I ruined everything.
I would have loved the Swan song, the Chris Coccia Swan song.
The Swan song was going to be me swan diving over the edge.
No, for Alan Hill, I'm Soul Joel. This was Chris Coccia dropping the mic.
Thank you guys.